This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Matt Gupta.
Chapter 41. The Haven Master's Deck. Aquila leapt into the air and brought his sword down on the pole of the glaive. The Haven Master held up the weapon and used the antler-like prongs on the blade to hook Aquila's hilt and push him to one side. Aquila was hardly a lightly weighted man, but the Haven Master threw him to one side as if several men were pulling him along a rope. Aquila crashed into the chosen wall. They stood immovable and simply pushed him with their weapons back into their makeshift arena. The Haven Master stepped away from Aquila on the floor and spun his blade around his head, showing off his skill. Aquila painfully got back to his feet. His back had landed on an uneven part of the deck. The Haven Master was starting to grow tired of the sport now, and his desire for blood took him. He went on the offensive and spun his blade in a disorientating whirl of double-ended steel. Aquila could barely defend himself, his single blade covering both sides of his body simultaneously. The Haven Master gave no opening nor opportunity for Aquila to press an attack. The clash of steel on steel drowned out the sounds of battle around them. There was no respite, no pause. The Haven Master's stamina appeared to be limitless, and Aquila felt his own arms grow heavy. The Haven Master sensed this and pressed his attacks with renewed vigor. The blade caught the back of Aquila's leg and tore through his flesh. Aquila leapt back and nearly fell to his knees. The Haven Master moved in for the kill. He stabbed down at Aquila, but in desperation, Aquila threw himself forward. The top of the glaive was trapped in the close combat. Aquila ignored the pain in his leg and brought his knee down on the wooden shaft of the glaive. The wood splintered under his weight and the weapon broke in half. The blade clattered to the floor and Aquila shoved the Haven Master back, who had lost his footing without the brace of his weapon. The Haven Master fell to the floor and slid slightly. Aquila checked the Chosen to make sure they weren't going to aid their master. They showed no sign of dismay, nor any signs of wanting to enter the fight. He pressed his attack, bringing his sword in a hack-down blow on the Haven Master. The Haven Master then attempted to block, but the broken weapon did little to protect him. He appeared to be ready for this, however, and spun back to his feet, while taking Aquila out from under him in the same move. The Master panted slightly, sweat now dripping down his face. He kicked up his other blade and swung them over his head to get a feel for the weight. Then he attacked Aquila with both blades, swinging one blade after the first, so it became easy to predict his blows. It was apparent that the Haven Master was not as well versed in dual-wielding his weapons as he was with the whole blade. Aquila remained on guard, however, ready for a bluff or a feint attack. After a series of blocks and blows, Aquila found an opening. The Haven Master swung both of his blades in a single blow, and Aquila blocked with his whole sword. He pinned the Haven Master in the curve of his swords, and with a single swipe, he unsheathed his father's blade and slashed the Haven Master's neck and arm. The Haven Master cried out and dropped his blades, blood flowing freely from his neck. He made a dive for his blade with his free hand, his other attempting to seal his wound. But Aquila kicked him away and then swept his blades aside. The Haven Master turned to his Chosen. "Sword," he cried out in the pirate tongue. "Give me a sword." The Chosen did not move. Most of them weren't even looking at the Haven Master. "Sword," he cried out again. "It looks like your men have abandoned you," Aquila panted, smiling. The Haven Master looked up at him, realizing his error. The chosen were assembled as they were to prevent one from fleeing the fight, not to raise arms for their master. He spat, more blood than spit. "Gladium will not be taken," he said in the common tongue. "My brothers will avenge me. Your fleet is lost. You will not see tomorrow." He leapt at Aquila. His bloodied hands curved into fists. Aquila ducked under his blows and sliced his stomach with both of his blades. The Haven Master fell to his knees, and Aquila swung his blade down hard on the Master's neck. After 3 heavy blows, he sliced the Haven Master's head clean off, and he fell dead onto the deck of his ship. Aquila's sword arm collapsed to the floor. He looked around at the chosen, all of whom were looking at each other. There were nearly 20 of them, and they could kill him in an instant, but instead they pushed past Aquila and lifted the body of the Haven Master onto their shoulders. Ignoring the man who killed their master and destroyed his body, they simply carried their master to the edge of the ship and threw his body into the water. After a moment, 4 men followed him into the abyss and were never seen again. The others turned to Aquila, drawing their weapons. He felt Amicus rush to his side. He was bloodied and sweating, his breaths louder than the battle around them. "Well fought," he panted. "What do we do now?" "We need the Haven Master's head," Aquila said, tensely, as they backed away from the black mass in front of them. "We must fight." The ship suddenly lurched forward, sending all of them to their knees. 2 of their ships had rammed a pirate ship behind them, and that ship had collided with the one they were on. The ship was empty, and the Marines rushed over to them and engaged the chosen in an instant. Aquila let the men fight and rushed to the Haven Master's head. The feet of the fighting men knocked it around, and he managed to grab it by the ear before it fell off into the water. Amicus followed him and killed a chosen with his back exposed. "Amicus, take this." He gave him the head after he wrapped it in his bloodied cloak. "Hang this from the highest point you can. If Mistnir is right, when they see it, they'll flee." Amicus nodded and rushed at the mast of the Haven Master's ship. Aquila let out a deep breath and rejoined the fight. Mistnir had managed to reform the kingdom lines and had stopped the pirates from surrounding them, but many more of their ships were destroyed and empty. The destruction was immense, but the battle was still far from in their favor. The men were tiring and ammunition was running low. An oarsman cried out to him and pointed at the mast of a ship. Mistnir tore away from his command post at his ship and rushed over to the sailor. Amicus had climbed to the top of a ship and had sliced off the pirate flag from the top, shouting. Even from here, they could hear him tell the pirates that their master was dead, and in his hands lay the proof. He held up a severed head by its closely cut hair. "That's it," Mistnir shouted. "Rally and attack." "We don't have enough ships," a captain protested. "I said attack," Mistnir shouted, punching the man and sending blood spraying out. "We need only make them rout once." For what seemed like a lifetime, there was no change to either fleet. The men and rowers on both sides were exhausted. But finally, the men under Mistnir managed to disentangle their ships from the pirate lines and began to attack. The pirates had spread themselves too thinly in their haste to push outwards of the wooden center of the field, to get away from the horror that their master was dead, and in several places the king's men had broken through. But Mistnir's forces were too scattered to fully enclose the pirate hordes, and many of the remaining intact ships were able to make their escape. The ships that were trapped in the center were left abandoned. Men fell into the water and were crushed against the various ships or were trapped under the hulls. 40 ships were escaping to the north, and Mistnir ordered the pursuit. They only had 3 single ships available to the chase, but the rally had done the damage it needed to. It would be short-lived, however, if the ships escaping were able to rally themselves, and, to Mistnir's horror, they did so. All of the ships stopped, turned, and began to advance on their northernmost flank, the one that had the least amount of fighters in the defense. If just one of those ships joined the fray there, that flank would be lost. "Admiral," a marine shouted, "sails to the north." "What?" Mistnir whispered to himself, pushing the man aside and limping over to the side. "Pirate reinforcements?" He let out a sigh that relieved every muscle in his body. "We are truly undone today." There were 10 ships approaching them. Only 10. Mistnir had to confirm with the man beside him. Since his return, his vision was blurring, and he felt the sway of the ship more so than usual. The distant shapes blurred together and parted into shadows of each other. Soon, even Mistnir could see that these ships were huge. Galleys with a length that matched 2 of each corsair ship. The Octaires were the biggest ships that had ever been seen on the sea in all of history. The ram on each ship was a masterpiece of art, some sporting massive birds of prey. Others posed statues of impressive-looking heroes. They were made of true silver, the rarest, strongest and sharpest of metals. The rest of the ship was riddled with over 100 massive oars to each side and huge white sails, which were so tall they could easily be draped over the walls of the marble city. The Lady Hypatia stepped forward, looking out to the battle going on before them, her perfectly golden hair braided in a work of art that left not a single hair out of place. "The Admiral's tactics are," she paused, "ambitious. It would have been interesting to see how they planned on succeeding without us. We're here now. We will not turn back. Had we arrived before, we could have saved more of our own men," the Swan said, standing in impressive yet much lighter silver armor. "Do not lament the past. We of Seaward are known for our fortuitous timing." Julius smiled and straightened himself to stand taller. He threw up his sword arm in a steel fist. The Corinthian elves under his command sprang into action. In one move, 4,000 warriors raised their bows and fired, many of them firing 2 arrows at once. For a moment, the sunlight was blotted out with the dark shafts of the arrows. Then it returned as the arrows smashed into the decks of the pirate ships ahead of them. Despite the distance, the arrows hit their mark. Few were wasted. Meanwhile, the other men on the ships unfurled the sails, and the ships were propelled forward, with a gust of wind that was perfectly timed for the sails to take flight. It was so violent that it momentarily knocked the soldiers forwards. They quickly returned to their positions and the next barrage began. The men's armor swept from shoulder to ankle in long, robe-like drapes of scaled mail, the plates lying flat and smooth, so the fabric-like folds moved with a fluid grace. The design gave the impression of ceremonial robes rather than battle garb, yet the interlocking scales offered the same unyielding protection as steel. Sleeves hung in elegant lines, tapering at the wrists, and every hem seemed cut by an artisan's hand to flow just so in the wind. The women's armor clung to each warrior like a second skin. The scale mail worked into a graceful corset shape that narrowed the waist and flared at the hips. The overlapping plates shimmered like silvered leaves in moonlight, flowing downward into layered skirts of fine, flexible scales. The skirts swayed with every step, almost whispering softly as they caught the air, allowing ease of movement while maintaining an air of courtly elegance. Every seam and contour seemed tailored to the individual, so that even in war, the soldier bore the poise of a queen. They weren't uniformed, however. Many of them had customized their own armor, and each had their own methods of fighting, ranging from daggers to massive yet feather-light two-handed axes in the shape of a phoenix head. Each wore a seemingly identical helmet, though. Each helm was shaped with a subtle flare along the sides, a gentle rise that followed the sweep of an elf's pointed ear, the metal flowing upward in a delicate curve, chased with filigree patterns of leaves and vines. Mistnir watched the sails unfurl. They were purest white with a blood-red image of a bearded man in the middle. Corinthos, he recalled to himself. Those ships are with us, he cried out. His guess was confirmed when the pirate ships attempted to turn away and make a sideways escape. There could not have been a worse mistake. The kingdom's ships smashed into the side of the pirates and pinned them in place. The elven ships adjusted their direction and tore through the ships that had been pinned. As the ships rushed past, many elven marines leapt off of their ships and landed perfectly on the various ships that remained intact, both kingdom and pirate. The Swan landed next to Mistnir. "Swan!" Mistnir shouted to him, even as he raised his sword to instinctively stab him. He ignored the battle and took him by the arm for a comrade's embrace. "What the fuck are you doing here?" "Enlisting your support," the Swan smiled. His curly brown hair was wet with salty spray. "For what?" As if in response to this question, the remaining elves on the ships began chorusing a chant of their long-lost lord Vepo. The elves rumbled his name over and over again, raising their weapons with each time they said it. They sailed past Mistnir's ships, as well as the broken pirate ships, and rushed straight at the main battle in the shadows of Gladium. Mistnir and the Swan had little to do once the remaining pirates were defeated, though they changed course to follow all the same. Aquila was woken from his fight by the cries of the elven fleet. He hadn't noticed them before, but now he was amazed at having done so. The massive ships cut through the water and smashed straight into the pirate ships that had surrounded them. As soon as the ships recovered, the men on board threw themselves over onto the ships. They landed perfectly in their shield wall formation. Their diamond shields were the same design as the fountain hoplites, only theirs were golden and had emeralds in the center, instead of the silver and sapphires. They used them in the same way, but when they needed to close the gaps, they used their heightened agility and closed in a quick sprint. The Lady Hypatia was dressed in white and coral blue cloth, with the same plate armor of the soldiers, which accentuated her beauty as well as her fierceness. She had 2 curved short swords on her back, lethal and shining, even when no light reflected on them. Once the vanguard was deployed, she and Julius leapt off of the ship and followed them with their own troops. Julius landed perfectly and lightly, despite his armor. The pirates had little chance against the skill of the elves, and their armor deflected many blows. Aquila left his fight to meet Julius and his forces. "My prince," he said to Julius, "what are you doing here?" "We received no news of Mistnir," Julius said. He was clearly annoyed that Aquila was impeding him joining the battle. "We hope to enlist his support in our campaign." Aquila raised an eyebrow. "They will not fight for your father." "Not for Alistair," Hypatia's voice appeared behind him. "For him," she looked at Julius. "Do I know you?" Aquila scowled at her, looking her up and down. He appeared disapproving, though whether it was her attire or her presence he disapproved of, they would not know. "No, but I know you. Pendragon." Julius looked confused. "A dragon?" "He's your king," Hypatia gazed intently. "Your high king." Julius was impatient and eager to join the battle, so he turned to Aquila and gave him a short bow. "Well then, if you'll excuse me, your grace." He leapt into the fray of a band of pirates that were attempting to outflank the main group of King's men. He smashed his shield into the ribs of a pirate and deftly deflected a blow to his head before bringing his blade down in a perfectly balanced slash. His kill moves were more with his shield than his sword. He attacked with a strength he had not possessed in his previous battles. Aquila watched him fight for a brief moment, and then he realized that Hypatia was no longer with him and was in the thick of the fight. Shaking his head with silent disapproval, he joined the fight as well. The battle lasted little over an hour. The sun was sinking in the afternoon sky when the horns of the kingdom sounded victory. The sky was thick with smoke coming from the burning ships, and the water was running red with blood for miles in all directions. The generals of the fleets met as the cheers died away. They met on Julius's ship, as it was the only one that wasn't entangled in the mass of the compressed wood. Mistnir was the last to arrive. He was blood-stained, injured and pale from blood loss, but it was his heavy heart that slowed him instead of the pain. Much of the Roman force had been destroyed. Marius and Andir had both been injured during a boarding party. The healers were doing what they could, but medicine was scarce on the sea, to the point he hadn't bothered to see to his own wounds. He sunk onto the deck of the ship and lay down when he arrived. "My prince," he said, from floor level, holding his head in his hands. "It is good to see you. You have no idea." "And you, Admiral?" Julius nodded, looking down at him without any surprise to his posture. "I am glad to see you alive. We were worried you had perished in the battle to the north." "You saw that, did you?" Amicus smiled wearily. He hadn't taken off his armor, and blood was still in his beard. "We had hoped to see you at the mouth to gain your support," the Swan said. "But when we heard you had sailed south, we went after you. When we saw the wreckage of the battle, we made all haste here to see if you had been captured." "You must have been surprised to see us winning then." Mistnir chuckled. He coughed and spat blood onto the deck. "I would hardly call it winning," the Swan scoffed. "I fear this victory a costly one. The routers would simply return the next day and destroy you." "True," Mistnir said. "Too many have died this day. I feel we cannot continue this campaign." "Why?" Aquila demanded. "The fleet is destroyed. The Haven Master is slain. Let us capture the city and be done." "We do not have enough men to keep the city," Julius said. "I have only 1,000 Marines, and we are not equipped to withstand a siege." "A siege?" Aquila raised an eyebrow. "Who will besiege us?" "Gladium will not let us have this victory," Mistnir groaned into a seated position. "The lower people will rise up against us if we attempt to take the city for our own." "Then let us blockade the city," Amicus said. "We can cut off the pirates from the world indefinitely." "We have little food to begin a blockade," Mistnir shook his head. "We would perish long before the pirates will." "And whose fault is that?" Aquila sneered. "A blockade is not an option," Mistnir stated, ignoring Aquila. He contented himself that he would need to be upright and began stretching his arms behind his back. "We must at least raid the city if we're to survive it. And the people will simply find ways to fight back against us," the Swan said. "The pirates have shown an ability to build ships at an impressive rate. If we are to have a full victory here, we must destroy the city." "Destroy it?" Aquila rounded on the Swan. "How could we do that without siege equipment?" "We enter the city through the port," the Swan grimaced. "We take the city from there, each street at a time. All of their hardened warriors were lost in the battle. We slaughter any who fight back. After that, there will be little resistance." Mistnir was nodding. "We are here to destroy Gladium in its entirety. We must think of what future generations will have to suffer should we let the pirate force live." "The royal fleet is in ruin," Hypatia said to Julius, as if the others were not there. "How many fighters would they have?" Enough to matter, Aquila spat, affronted that she didn't put the question directly to him. How many people would still be in the city? It is a city to rival Seaward, Julius shrugged. In that city alone, we have well into the hundreds of thousands. Civilians, the Swan pointed out. Many who have undoubtedly begun fleeing the city, and the scum have hardly kept it as a fortress against a land assault. I agree, Mistnir exhaled deeply. The men would be eager to see the riches they were promised. We should allow our men to loot and pillage the city without restraint. When we are done, we shall raise the city. The remnants of Gladium will do with the ruin as they see fit. It was Aquila's decision in the end. He was exhausted and was not in the mood to think hard. The pressure was on him though, and this was his moment to gain his success. The riches in Gladium would be enough to fund the kingdom for many years, and the pirates would never stop attacking if he did not. He nodded in agreement. When shall we begin? Now, Mistnir stood. We should move into the harbour and set ourselves up before they have a chance to hinder us. The men are exhausted, but the prospect of rewards and a roof over their heads will rejuvenate them. Everyone was in agreement. Very well, Aquila commanded. Let us see it done.